Morning, everybody. Happy New Year. Um, I guess this morning, or for this video, I should say, I think the only thing I really want to talk about, for once, is actually the C5. Normally, I like talking about different cars besides like just C5s over and over again. Even though I know that's what a lot of people probably want to see, right? Anything about the Corvettes because they are Corvettes. So, but this one I will, and this one is mostly just, I guess, a little guidance, right? If you're looking at the C5s, be careful with which one you're looking for, regardless of, well, or not regardless, but like even if you get an automatic or even if you get a manual, I don't really care, right? Corvette's a Corvette, right? The only thing I can say is like really look between a pretty much a, when I say early and later C5, I say anything pretty much pre 2001 and post 2001. That's basically kind of how I like to split up the C5s. Certain things maybe disregard the 2001 models, but for the one big one, right? This might be the biggest difference of the bunch. Is probably the EBCM, more than likely. I think that is an issue. Like I said, that's a pretty big issue for the C5s. That's a C6 in front of me. Hello. Look at that. But yeah, I think that's the biggest difference between the two is the EBCMs. I think, right, the big one would be early ones have EBCMs that are not repairable, right? And I think the hardest part about that one is the fact that there's no one that makes it, right? They don't make it anymore. It's kind of like first gen 90s style tech, I guess. So they don't really manufacture that anymore. So that's quite hard to come by. And this is from 97 to 2000, specifically that one. That's the one that had the older EBCM that they do not make, and even when they did, it was not repairable. You just had to buy a new one, right? So I think the big risk is the fact that from after 2001, they still make EBCMs for that to this day, and it is actually quite repairable if something were to go wrong in that. But the big risk if you buy a pretty much an early C5 is if that module dies, you pretty much have to risk buying however much it costs to buy a used one and hope that stays fine. Like instead of the way the later models were, like the EBCMs didn't really have that much like craziness to it, where it's still repairable, right? And it had a little bit of a better chance of pretty much being a long-term vehicle. So that was a big one for early to later C5s. The other one I can say as well is based on, I guess, performance, right? On the base models, obviously, they bumped the power up from that early time period, the early C5s, all the way up to the 2001 to 2004 got a slight power bump. They literally changed the rating from 345 horsepower to 350. But I think there's one key difference here. I think they kind of just did a slight tune, but I think the car could actually make more because of one thing. The 01 to 04 specific models of the C5 had a standard LS6 intake manifold. which, if you don't know what an LS6 intake manifold is, it is off of the C5 CO6s, which, it's not like probably, well, no, it is. It's probably one of the best like GM factory intake manifolds like that they've ever made, right? Especially for the C5. The C5, that was pretty much a huge difference maker for that car, was getting a switch on the intake manifold, where the LS6 manifold it's a much higher flowing manifold than the early LS1s. So you can really like make more power off of the LS6 manifolds just because of flow, right? Airflow is a really big thing, especially if the one thing you're mainly into is performance. So from 01 to 04, it became standard on those C5s that they had the Z06 manifolds. Then some other ones, another big one too actually, is if you didn't get the manual versions, which I think for most people, if you were to go ahead and do any sort of power relating things, obviously the T56 is the better option over the 4060. It just is, right? It's a stronger transmission. But if you're not rowing gears and you have an automatic transmission, the big one is the later, specifically for this one, 2002, right? The 2002 to 2004 C5s compared to the ones previous had pretty much a full-blown upgrade / refinement on the 4060s, right? They had how do you word it? I guess a refinement to the valve body. Obviously, all of them already had Corvette servos, so that's not much of a problem. Say servos, especially on the 4060s, those servos actually help a lot, right? That's why I see a lot of people trying to, even on the regular cars, they try to switch their cars that have 4060s and put a Corvette servo in it, because the servos actually help with trying to apply the clutch. It applies 50% more, so any sort of slipping, it kind of gets reduced heavily because that servo is existing there. Well, obviously the Corvettes already have that, but the valve body is refined and new. And internally, it is slightly stronger, right? It was slightly stronger. They never really came out and said exactly what was strengthened, or like the limits of what was strengthened, but pretty much the only real purpose of that change, especially from that last 3 years, was pretty much just to make sure the car, at least the automatics, can handle the C5's torque more reliably than the early versions. And they just changed that just to make sure that like it can handle the torque that it's making off the gate. Right now, if you try to go beyond what it was intended for, obviously you're going to break it regardless. But from just a stock factory standpoint, that was the whole purpose of it, was just to make it where it could do that, where it could just handle it more reliably long term as well. Another one is, some other ones I should say, torque tubes, right? Beautiful torque tube. 2001s to 2004s had that big improvement, or slight improvement, where I guess all they really did was basically upgrade the couplers for the torque tube. They just upgraded it just so that it can reduce vibration, because I guess that was a big thing. That was some things that people would complain about, but that's really all. Like for that one, for the torque tube, there wasn't much besides that, especially for the C5, just because it's early years. That's a C7 next to me. Hello, sir. Good morning. Yeah, I'm like, torque tubes. Like, they got some slightly upgraded couplers just to handle what the car had that they had at the time, right? I'm not gonna say it's anything crazy where now this car can handle 6, 7, 800 horsepower bones. Like, let's relax, okay? Like, this is not the C6 or C7. This is still kind of the project version, the project car of GM, right? They're still in the early works of it. C6 and C7's pretty much got everything, every refinement. Like, some only other ones that I could say, like, if you were looking into C5s, this is the case for all C5s. It's as simple as it sounds. The battery, right? Battery, please, please, and I urge it. You get one and you look in the engine bay and make sure you do not have a side post battery. And two, make sure that battery is not liquid. Make sure, please, get a AGM or some sort of gel battery, because the biggest thing for the car, right, especially for that one, is I don't know what the heck they were thinking, but whoever genius came up with this had a great time. The main wiring harness and the PCM sits directly underneath the battery, like straight up. So I'm like, it's just, oh man. And if there's any sort of battery leaking, like even like any sort of acid, I'm like, it will destroy that PCM. Like, it will go right through that. I'm like, oh god. So it's just, it sucks, right? I don't know why they thought about it, but that's just what they had for this car. I don't know why they did that. I would say, yeah, you would have to pretty much get rid of, or yeah, if you have a liquid battery, replace it with an AGM. I don't say just do that anywhere you live. Like, if you don't want to risk having that PCM just get absolutely wrecked, replace it with an AGM or some sort of gel battery so it doesn't have a chance of even leaking, right? You say that's not a fun time. But I think that's the only big one on some other electrical things. There's definitely some other things for sure. They've like, obviously by every year they kind of try to make some slight improvements that they don't really say, but I know they do it just because they have probably had some sort of complaint about the car on previous years. So that's why you have, I think, probably the 03 and 04 versions are probably your most refined versions, and even 2002. Like, some only other ones I could say is pretty much from a slight mechanical difference, is the 97 to 2000 had a return style fuel system, right? Say the later versions, like mine, from 2001 to 2004, had returnless styles, which is pretty much what most cars have now, right? They're returnless style systems. It's just more of a modernized thing. It's easier on the car. That's all you gotta know about the fueling system. Like, they just literally went from return to returnless. In terms of, like, there's no like injector differences or anything like that. They didn't bother with that. The other one is for active handling as well, actually. Later C5s had it standard on the car. The early ones did not. Early C5s had optional active handling, and even if you did have it, it didn't work as well as the later versions. The later versions, obviously, it was much, from an electronic standpoint, I guess for that time, it was much more improved upon than the early C5s, which had obviously its flaws, because this is, like I said, this is the project car GM. They were just trying whatever they had at this point. They were throwing it at this car. So active handling, yes, it works much better on the the later versions. And just became a standard feature instead of an optional feature. So I think that's the only real other differences. Like I said, I think the biggest ones for sure would basically be the EBCM on the car, right? Later ones being still made to this day, and even then, if you wanted to just get it repaired, it's repairable compared to early ones. And then obviously, like I said, the only other one that you could change yourself is straight up the battery itself. Hit a battery, just replace it to a gel battery, and you should really be set from there, to be honest, right? Like anything else, it just, whatever happens with a car, it's kind of a luck of the draw thing. But I think those are some pretty much key differences and improvements that GM had made upon, while they were making this car. So I think, yeah, if you really want to consider buying a C5, I'd consider looking at those things first. Really look into what are you willing to do to this car. Like, even if you don't daily drive it, like, some things are just still a hassle to deal with. So, but that's up to you. If you want to deal with early versions of C5, that's cool. I bought an 04 because I didn't want to see any of that, and obviously it's an 04. This should be one of the more refined versions of the C5. 02 to 04, I think pretty much is a sweet range because that pretty much had everything changed. So, but I'm probably about to start heading to work here. Have a great day, guys, and Happy New Year. I'm out.